I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hey everybody, it's Lauren Kling. Welcome to another episode of World on Fire, the after show for the PBS Masterpiece Show. I am not alone. Each week I am here to break down the episodes with Tori Weaver. How are you, Tori?
Yes, I'm good. Can't wait for us to get into this episode because there's always so much happening. They pack so much into the hour.
They do. And now that we're well underway with the war in 1939, what are your reactions to this episode?
Uh, it just feels like everything is always happening so fast. And this is definitely one of those series that you cannot pick up your phone because you're definitely going to miss something. So I was like glued to the TV trying to figure out what was going to happen. But there's a lot of dynamics going on. And I think towards the end of the episode, we're going to see a lot of these start to shift in the next episode to come.
That's right. We had a lot of things going on. The two people I was really surprised and glad that their characters are developing is one, Robina Chase, that's Harry's mom, who sticks up for Jan, and then also Tom, kind of the wayward brother, Lois's brother, who's on board the Exeter, finding a little humanity in him, not too much, but just enough to allow us to not hate him 100%. So let's start with Tom, because Tom was portrayed as the ne'er-do-well of the family, kind of always getting arrested and picked up by the cops, or the bobbies, I guess. But here on the Exeter, who's going out to chase down a German warship, he's kind of he's gambling with a bird. What do you think of that?
Yeah, he's definitely like, even though he's kind of joined this strict form of, this strict thing, which is the military, he's still like finding ways to be himself and like push the boundaries throughout the entire process. And I think that's just like him staying true to himself. Like, even though he joined, we knew that he wasn't going to follow the rules and be like this, like stand up guy all the time. So it was just funny to see.
Yeah, but it seemed like this was the first time once the ship actually goes under fire. It's kind of the first time we're seeing his character actually face death and how he reacts to it. There's a little more humanity in him than we think. But then kind of afterwards, after there's a lot of damage and he sees some of his cohorts dead on the ship, he's kind of back to here's giving the money out, the winnings out to a sailor who's kind of like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it was interesting watching it play out, like, beyond just his, like, normal self or, like, his banter that he does. Like you said, this is the first time that his character has faced, like, this life-threatening thing, and so, you kinda like, it's kinda like he was, like, fighting with himself, like, he was fighting against growing up, and, like, we saw, like you said, that side of humanity where he's, like, respecting the dead and things like that, but then we also kinda saw him shift back into his old self when he was handing out the winnings, so it was I definitely think in this series and through this process that he's in, I think we're going to see him do that a lot. Just kind of like that push and pull of who we were introduced to him as and who the man that he's going to become. So I think we're going to see that a lot in these upcoming episodes.
Yeah, very well said. Is there any, I'll give it to you if there's another character you want to start talking about.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because you said it earlier, the mom and Yan. I think that dynamic is one that we predicted in our previous episode, and I think our predictions are coming true, honestly. It seems like their relationship is becoming like she's definitely stepping in as that mother figure, even though, we all know that he has a mom that recently passed in the previous episodes. But it's like she's definitely taken him under her wing. And even though she doesn't know much about his family or his background, and she's slowly learning more about him, she already has stepped in to protect him against bullies and things like that. And it's just interesting to see because we know that her dynamic with Harry isn't the best.
Mhm.
So I know that we mentioned that this is kind of like her second chance at being a mom, and so I definitely am seeing that play out in this episode. What did you think?
Yeah, definitely seeing her go up to the kids at school and basically tell them that Jan's family's been fighting Hitler. So are you on the side of Hitler? I thought that was pretty powerful. But then later on, when she gives him that book, or the
Yeah.
pictures of his family and is trying to speak English, and he's like, "No, wife." Robina's like, "No, no, 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 not wife."
Yeah. You know, sometimes in shows, like, you think that you missed something. You're like, "Oh, wait, does this character know? Did we just not see it?" There was a point in, like, in this episode where I was like, "Well, does the mom know, like, his specific relationship to Harry, or are we still gonna figure out, like, did I miss it?" But after this part in the episode, I was like, "No, we definitely didn't miss it." Like, this is the moment where she finds out exactly what Harry's relationship is to this little boy, and it's not just some random refugee that he wanted to save. And I don't necessarily think that it's going to change the dynamic between her and Yan, because I think they already have a pretty strong, bond already that they're developing. But I definitely think it's going to change the way that she sees Harry. I don't know. I mean, it's probably impossible to get in contact with him because he's off in the war right now. But I know that there's a lot of things going through her brain, knowing that her son is now married.
I know. Well, as you're talking, I'm trying to think how would she form that question next time she speaks with him? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I have a question. So this Kaja lady, is she your wife? I know it wouldn't be that like that. But yeah, so let's talk about Kaja. Kaja is still fighting for the Polish underground, and she's told by her cohorts to find a German soldier, anyone she can find, to lure him so he can be shot. But she happens to find somebody nice. And at first I'm like, wait, how he's not just a random German. He is the older brother of Hilda, whose family lives next door to Nancy. And I'm
Hmm.
like, of course, part of me is like, okay, what are the chances? And I'm like, all right, I'm watching a
Right.
TV show. What do you think of that? Did you get that right away?
I didn't get that right away. I had to, again, this is definitely one of those shows where you have to, like, pay attention to every little detail, but eventually I definitely caught on, and I was like, "Ooh," like you said, what are the odds that this is, that everyone's connected? But I think we see that in this series, that in some sort of way, all of these characters are connected, whether they know it or not. Like, even Nancy's nephew, who's in Paris, doesn't know that he's connected to all these things. So I knew that it was going to be something deeper to the story and to that connection. But it was I definitely didn't think that she was going to follow through with it. Like, when she was first given the orders, I was like, this is a pretty tough task. Like, to
Yeah.
ask of someone who's not necessarily a stranger to death, because we've seen that she has been a witness to it several times over the past couple of episodes. But she's not really, the most violent type. She's not someone who just kills for no reason. She's just not that type of person. And so I didn't think that she was going to carry it out, but then I was like, maybe she will, because she's still mourning the death of her parents. And then after we saw it play out, I was like, I mean, yeah, it's hard. I feel like it's hard to ask of anyone, even if you are experiencing these hardships, there's still a level of humanity, I guess, there.
Hmm.
Um, which is hard, because I mean, this war is definitely, like, they are polar opposites when it comes to beliefs. And so it's kind of hard to be like, oh yeah, you're still a person, even though our ideas are completely different. But I think sometimes it does get a little blurred and it's a little hard. Like, she wasn't able to just see him as someone who's on the opposite side. She just saw him as a person who didn't really deserve to die, just because he was on the opposite end of a war. And so it was interesting seeing her mentality and her approach toward it change over the episode.
Yeah, very well said. It's interesting because you don't often hear the stories from the people on the other side who, we think of the Germans as a collective one, that everybody has one feeling, when in reality, we know that not everyone agrees on different things. And so, yeah, very well said. Now let's talk about the guy you love, Sean Bean, the father. And I feel really bad for him because he's a dad
Yeah.
who's all alone. He's got his kids off to war, and he is trying to find out about his son on the Exeter and doesn't know if he's survived or not.
Yeah. I mean, it seeing him in the series is just so heartbreaking to watch, because the minute that his both of his children decided to join the army, in some sort of way, I knew that that just like crushed his heart. And I hope I'm using the right words. I think it's just the military.
Hmm.
They decided to use that they decided to join. I knew that crushed his heart in itself. And then, like you said, just kind of playing this guessing game of not knowing when you wake up if your child is going to be alive. I mean, he has two children that he has to look out for. He cannot get in contact with either of them easily. And of course, like we see today in newspapers, they're not going to always print out all of the casualties. You know, they don't really like pay respect to every single person who has passed away. And although they hold like these crazy weights in our heart, you know, unfortunately they don't always make it to the press. So it's hard like hearing that there's six, you know, casualties or in, in a war or in a certain battle, and you not know if one of those was your son, your daughter. I mean, his daughter could be caught in the crossfire as well. So I know that his anxiety is extremely through the roof every day trying to figure out if his children are safe. And I mean, as a parent, you want to be there to protect your kids, and he's nowhere near them to protect them. So I know that's
Right.
just like weighing on his heart.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to watch him going through that. Let's talk about Nancy before we wrap up the
Hmm.
breakdown. So Nancy's still in Berlin. It's kind of interesting because when she's in Berlin and she's working for radio, she's got her minder, her producer. She kind of is a little bit outspoken, kind of like ignorant of the things you're allowed to say in public or out loud and the things you're not. And so I was a little nervous when she was talking with her minder about, I want to see this Dr. Voller. I want to have an interview with him because I think Dr. Voller is doing things to these disabled kids.
Hmm.
um but everybody's like, no, no, I don't want to talk. Her neighbors are like, I don't want to talk about it. Her minder's like, you don't want to go down that road, but she doesn't want to give up. So it's it's hard for me not to feel a little bit that she's kind of thinks that she can do whatever she wants while she's in Berlin.
Yeah, and you can definitely tell that she has a personal connection to just not only this story, but I think just the truth of situations that often don't really come to light, especially through the press. I mean, we've seen all of her articles have like these big black, you know, lines through them because of the things that she's not allowed to say, and she just keeps pushing that boundary. I think that is, I think having that passion for the truth is definitely a blessing and a curse, and I think as journalists we can all agree that because sometimes you get so invested in wanting to find out the truth that you end up hurting either your own feelings because you're invested and you find out something that's just like unbearable to say, or you might hurt someone else in the process of finding that truth. And I think we saw that today because in the episode, you know, even though she felt like she was doing what was best and she wanted to get the information because she obviously has this connection to this little girl in her family, but she also didn't realize that in doing that, she could have also put that family in terrible danger. And so it was hard because you know that her intentions are so pure and she just wants to help. But like you said, because she's so invested in the truth, I think sometimes she can have her blinders on to the way society is functioning. Like, even though, yes, there are horrible things going on, but there's still survival tactics that we have to figure out how to navigate and use to our advantage. And even though we all want to know the truth, to what extent do we want to know? Because now she knows the truth, but that family could possibly not make it to the next episode.
Yeah, I know it's hard because we know the eventual outcome of the war, but at this point, America's not in it. They don't want to get into the war, and I know it took Pearl Harbor in 41 for America to go into the war, but at this point, it was more the British were kind of just getting into this. And so yeah, it's I'm curious to see what's going to happen with Nancy throughout this 1939, this first season. So
Hmm.
any last thoughts about anybody in particular, any parts of this episode?
No. Oh, we didn't talk about how Lois is possibly pregnant by Harry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm definitely wondering how that's going to play out. I wonder if she's going to continue to kind of push him to the side, or if they're going to try to come together, or what decisions she's going to make. I mean, that's a in the middle of war, being pregnant is another layer of stress. And I wonder
Uh-huh.
how that's going to play out. But we also realize this is not a fairy tale, and Harry is still married to someone else. And so I don't know. This is kind of like that juicy drama in like the middle of all this chaos going on. But it definitely added another layer to this like love triangle. I think it kind of made the love triangle a little bit more serious. Like you have a wife, but then you also have someone who's carrying your child. So that's tricky. That's a lot.
Yeah, my wife and I are watching Outlander, and so same. I mean, this is more. That one is like a romance novel kind of drama.
Mhm.
This one is drama, but still, you know, I see similarities in some of the characters' development. You know, getting pregnant, which definitely changes the path of. Especially a woman in these kind of things when they're in a
Mhm.
war or actively fighting in a war or avoiding war. So we'll see what happens. Not as nearly as much nudity in World on Fire as there is in Outlander.
Yeah, for sure.
So all right, well, thank you, Tori, for helping me to break down this episode 3. Let's go to your special segment you call Unsung Heroes.
Yes, it's time for our unsung heroes. This is always like so fun because I get to get a mini history lesson, and I'm always like trying to pack all this information into this little segment. But our unsung hero for today is Henry Knox. And fun fact, he is actually, well, sorry, Knoxville, Tennessee is actually what it's named after him. So I thought that was a
Oh,
cool little
wow.
thing because I did not know that. The little backstory about him: after his father died, he started working at a bookstore in Boston, and he actually had hopes of opening up his own bookstore. Those dreams were put on pause because there was a boycott going on, and he wasn't able to buy the supplies needed for his bookstore. So while he was on boycott and just sitting at home, like a lot of us are doing now, he decided to like brush up his knowledge on geometry and artillery and militia and war taxes and things like that, and actually joined the artillery division of the Massachusetts militia. So again, while this boycott is happening, he's just kind of like honing in his skills. And through his time serving in the militia, and actually served under George Washington, he helped to break the siege of Boston. And it was a lot of his tactics that were able to set the groundwork for our current army and navy system that we have now. He ended up serving as Secretary of War under George Washington once he became elected. Sorry, and so he's like a little, well, no, he's a unsung hero
Wow.
of the
That's
American Revolution.
all right. I love this kind of history. I think this is my favorite part of the show is your segment. Thank
Yes.
you.
Oh, and
Are
if everyone's wondering, he
yeah.
actually ended up opening up his bookstore.
Oh, he did.
Yes, he did.
Got it. All right. With a little, is there like a little Starbucks coffee shop in the back of the bookstore?
Probably.
Probably, yeah. Thank you, Tori.
No
So I'm going to
problem.
go on to news. And now, back in January, some of the cast of Worlds on Fire were going around the world doing kind of press tours. And there was one in Pasadena in January. Um, and what was a few things I learned is season 1 of the show was set in 1939. Season 2 is going to follow the characters into 1940. So
Mm.
still, this is all pre-America.
Yes.
Really interesting. And then one of the executive producers and writers, Peter Bowker, explained that the show is kind of inspired by a 1970s documentary called World at War, and how it provided inspiration because they were basically trying to make a fictional version of this documentary that follows various perspectives on the war. So
Mm.
I think that's really interesting that they're taking an idea of a documentary that follows people in a war, making a dramatic scripted show about the war. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And then we know Nancy Campbell is an American journalist, and the character is a combination of 2 real life journalists, William Shire, who did daily broadcasts and kept diaries during World Time, and then British war correspondent Claire Hollingwood, who actually did see Nazi tanks gather on the Polish border.
Wow.
So I find that interesting. I know last week I'd mentioned how the actress that plays Lois, her grandmother was part of the British version of the USO, who was a
Hmm.
jazz singer and played around that time. So this is another example. If you watch a lot of these after shows, either hosting or watching them, it's really interesting to learn that writers on these scripted shows are using things they know. Actors are
Yeah.
using things they know. I find, and so I kind of get nerded out about this, is how alive this history still is and still can be to us today.
Yeah, and I think this just goes to show that when you, like you said, when you use what you know and use what we have, that the show can be just as entertaining instead of just like making stuff out of thin air. And so I love that this show is really trying to hone in on that historical aspect, because sometimes period pieces, like, they're great and we love them, but they're not as historically correct as they could be. And so
Mhm.
I do like that this show is using things from like several levels. Even, I mean, with Lois's character, sorry, her the actor that plays her, even pulling from her own inspiration and things that she knows in her own family lineage. I love how everyone is pulling from actual historical context text to actually like put together this show.
Yeah, exactly. All right, before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you on behalf of Tori and AfterBuzz. Thank you to everyone out there that's watching. We are the ESPN of TV Talk, and we really appreciate you following the show. We would love you to leave comments if you have any comments below. If you're watching us on our YouTube video, let us know if there's anything about history you love, any insight you have about the series or about the war around 1939. Give us a thumbs up. And if you're listening to us on iTunes or your favorite podcast player, give us a great review. Let us know how we're doing. And finally, if you want to reach us directly, you can do so by contacting me on Instagram at Lauren Kling, LorenKling. And Tori, where can people find you?
Yes, you guys can find me on Instagram at Toxic Model or on Twitter at Tori with 2 E's. But if you type in TOREE, I'll pop up.
Perfect. All right. From all of us at AfterBuzz, thank you so much, everybody. We'll be back next Monday at the same time. Goodbye, everybody.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.